Good morning, everybody. So I would like to welcome you all today to the 13th talk of Artists Beyond the Studio, a series of talks by artists associated with Graphic Studio Dublin during lockdown 2021. This week, it is my pleasure to introduce my good friend Ailbhe Barrett to you all. Ailbhe is a painter and printmaker, originally from Granagh in County Limerick. She has been an active and committed member of Graphic Studio Dublin since 2015, serving on the board of directors from 2016 to 2020. In 2018, Ailbhe was the selected artist for the annual Behaviour and Attitudes Commission at Graphic Studio Dublin. This was the 30th anniversary of the commission, and Ailbhe made 4 etchings for the project. She was the winner of the ESB Keating Medal at the 188th RHA annual exhibition. In 2019, she was awarded a month-long residency at the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris, where she spent a month researching and drawing for an upcoming exhibition. A self-taught artist, Ailbhe studied painting before coming to make etchings, and this is evident in the way she makes her prints. Her work seeks to explore the relationships between drawing, painting, and printmaking, and we can see in the work that each medium informs the others. Ailbhe's approach to making etchings is a painterly one, creating tones and soft layers, never afraid to add some monoprint or roll-up techniques to achieve her wonderful moody skies and misty vistas. The work is often ambitious in scale and uses a variety of techniques: hard and soft ground line, some dry point, lots of aquatints and delicate spit bites, often printing to the edges of the paper, luring us further into her immersive landscapes. In this series, we are looking at artists who return to an intrinsic source or subject matter in their work. Ailbhe's work draws on the natural environment and our relationship to the world around us. The places depicted in her paintings and prints, for me, capture something essential of our world, and then they seem to go beyond that point, to dig a little deeper into our soul. These landscapes feed into Ailbhe's inquiry into ideas of identity, place, and belonging. They describe landscapes and views, often of places that she knows from her childhood in County Limerick, and this connection and sense of place is something that draws the viewer into the work. There is a strong emotional charge held in these images. They seem to invite the viewer to contemplate an inner world suggested by these evocative scenes. They tell of connections, memories, and emotions associated with place, imbuing the work with a depth and a resonance that goes beyond the literal. The landscape and its ever-changing moods, colours, and atmospheres is an endless source from which she can explore and research these themes. I'm interested to hear Ailbhe talk today about her work and how she chooses her subject matter. I hope she will tell us something of how her work has evolved over the past few years, her research process, her influences, and where she plans to take it next. So good morning, Ailbhe. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, Niamh. That was a lovely, flattering introduction. And thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, so I thought that I would take the opportunity just for this talk to kind of to elaborate a little bit on the most recent work that I've been working on, or that has been taking my attention over the past 4 or 5 years. So the first image here. So the subject matter for this body of work is almost always the immediate surroundings from the area from where I'm from. And I think that with repeated visits to it, both physically and metaphorically, I am attempting to distill some sense of place or an essence of it in the work, because it's such a fundamental part of our identity, I think, where we're from and where we have been. Even if you've had a more nomadic background, I think it's still a huge part of us. And it's something I've been addressing on in my work and dwelling on a lot over the last number of years. So I'll start with this piece. This is an etching from 2016. These are not in any chronological order, just it's more just kind of an overview of the body of work. So I'm just going to share some of them here and talk about them a little bit. Yeah, so this one it's a view. It's from work done from an old bedroom of mine, a view from the bedroom, and so it has a lot of resonances for me. a lot of the images in this series this is an ongoing body of work that I think I've been going to and from it since I began work as an artist. I think I've gone, maybe worked on 3 or 4 threads, but this one I keep kind of coming back to, and it has definitely dominated the last 5 or 6 years, I think, at least. Yeah, and it's in the next one. I'll just bring up. This one, is the title here tells you that it's the same locality as the previous one, Durlas, which is where I'm from in Granagh. Excuse me. It's this one is a bigger, quite a big print. And it's an etching with monoprint. I think for a lot of these works, I use painting, print, drawing, and I use photography a lot to kind of gather source material for that particular body of work, just to try and figure out which medium is the best vehicle, if you like, to get across what I want to put into the works. Even though I don't really see my work as political as well at all, I do find it interesting to dwell on the concept of land and home and those ideas and what they are to us, how they kind of how they maybe they influence us so much or color so much of our lives for throughout our lives, and the whole concept of where we get our traditions and our knowledge, our local knowledge and our cultures and all of that. And then of course the more negative side to the whole idea of ownership and territories, boundaries, containment, all of that side of it, which is very obviously quite topical at the moment, and probably will increasingly be so with more movements of people, I suppose, worldwide, with people who are forced to move with everything from climate change to wars and to all of these different reasons that they may or may not have to move. And it's just an interesting topic, I think, to think about as well. I think it's something we've been good at addressing as well in Irish culture. I'm just going to show detail of the same one here. That's just a close-up detail of you can see some of the monoprint happening there. I think that in this country we have traditionally in writing and in theatre, playwrights, and we've been good at addressing our attachment to the land and a sense of loss often, or also our obsession with it, maybe even. So that's something that's interesting to think about, I think. So this piece then is it's carborundum mostly worked. It's another print. It's quite a large print as well, with some etching in the background. You can see there the carborundum is the heavy ink that you see closer to the foreground, I think. And I used a lot of spit bite on this. I think this was it 4 plates? Again, this was done for a lot of what I'm showing here would have been shown in an exhibition I had in 2017 called Infusions, which was my first solo exhibition. So this one is again kind of in the immediate locality of where I'm from, and sometimes there's a lovely sense of history, not necessarily of any great events or anything, but more just that sense of a steady passing of time and sort of stories and knowledge contained in the land and in the areas that has kind of happened in the times before us. So you sometimes, when you have the time to be, I think, to just be in the land and to just be in the area, you get that sense, I think. So that was 2017, that piece. Yeah, this is a painting. It was quite I think it was medium to large size. It's a series that I gathered all of the source material for we call it a sub-series of the sort of home, but it was a particular group of works that I wanted to make that I had gathered the information for in, I don't know if you remember the two hard winters we had in 2010. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was the January and December in the same year, 2 winters, but the same year. And I got a lot of material, I think, from that time, and I had intended on working maybe 10, 12 pieces. And I think I ended up getting 4 of them done. I may return to it because I had a lot of material from it. I remember taking a lot of photographs and writing a lot about it, actually, because I found it very hard to sketch. Just the practicality, my hand was freezing doing watercolors out there and things. But there was a very real sense of sort of stillness and a sort of a quietness and a sense of the ethereal, I think, at the time. And I found that very striking and something that I wanted to explore a little bit in the work. So that, again, I may come back to that. And that series was, as I say, it was mostly large paintings that I did from it. I'm just going to go to the next one. This piece then, Presence. This came from one of those times when I had a very real sense of presence at the time, and I had just a kind of a strong awareness or a sense of being just in the moment, I suppose. And I think a lot of the work that I do, I mainly, it's very personal, and I like to try and get the emotion or the feeling or the sense of maybe attachment and associations with a particular place at a particular time, and I try to put that into the work. Again, it's a very, very, maybe a simple kind of a small thing to think about, but at the same time, it's the reason that I make the works, I think. And it's something, again, that I try to examine and figure out while I'm making the works, and try to. They often, like, I think anyone who makes art knows that sometimes as you're making it changes along the way. But I think a lot of the reason that I make art is that I'm trying to figure out my own kind of relationship to certain, in this series, to place and to my roots and my kind of history and background, I think. That's the same painting, just for a sense of scale there, that was at exhibition in 2018 in the RHA. I also did a print with the same name. It's the same area. It's slightly kind of from the other angle. With this, I think I was playing, like, I have an interest in the power of color and the emotional power of it. And I think I was experimenting a little bit there with that. I think abstraction in general, this isn't, but in general, I think it invites sort of, it encourages involvement with the viewer. So that's what I find interesting about it. So that was, at the time, that was relatively experimental. I was trying different things, and it's, as you can see by the title there, Presence, is another sort of mini sub-series that I'm working on, and I have a couple more pieces that are in progress with the same title, probably. this piece then is more general, I suppose, landscape. I often think, or I thought about when I look at that piece sometimes, what is it about landscape that kind of draws us, or is such a universal language for us worldwide? I think it's quite interesting, and there are a few. There's even been a few neuroscientific kind of studies into it, and they can be quite interesting. I remember one of the more logical conclusions that they came to in some. I don't have the source, but there was if I can find it, a study on it, and it came down to, they made out that we were highly visual creatures, bipedal, and when we travel or we come to a place, we like to kind of scan the horizon and scan the environment, and to feel a sense of safety and a sense of where we are, and it's I just thought that was quite an interesting way of or idea, because of course it's very true. And then there's deeper levels as well, why I think landscape is such a big, and always has been, I suppose, a big topic for artists, and not just the sort of topography, but the deeper meaning to it for us, as a species. I remember hearing an interesting discussion with Canadian artists, and they were talking about the idea of the invisible landscape. In other words, the spiritual and the sort of, again, the stories in the land that are contained from the past, and what happened in the area before, and this sort of deep indigenous knowledge that I think they, during that discussion, it was sometime last year, I was listening to it, and they made out that modern schooling, modern lifestyle was kind of separating us a bit from that. And it was just another interesting debate on it, and all of those, because I love the idea of this sort of subliminal connections that we have, and it kind of, for me, it kind of resonated with me what they were saying. So yeah, this next image is one of the, Niamh mentioned the Behaviour and Attitudes Commission, which I was delighted to work on. So I decided, after talking to Ruth and those involved in behaviour and attitudes, that we would make this commission part of the series that I was working on at the time, because it would, generally speaking, I find it more successful if to work on something that's occupying me and preoccupying me at the time anyway. And yeah, so I decided to work on this, continue with the same theme that I had been focused on, which is and a lot of these are from, again, the very locality, immediate locality, from where I'm from. This one is broom, poplar, hawthorn. Yeah, that was. These were a series of 4 etchings, all of them 4-plate etchings, I think. The second one, same here, yeah. Sorry, just looking at some notes here. Yeah, and going back just very briefly to the subliminal collections, I think, or connections, I think our collective memory is very affected by history and things, and traditions and culture. So I think that's why it's so significant, and I feel that it's something that is worthy of a lot of kind of thought. So yeah, and maybe our consciousness is kind of has moved faster in one sense than our subconscious. All of that kind of, that sort of area, I find very interesting. So I'm just going to go through these here. That's the third one from that series. They're a series that I was very happy with in the end, and it was really nice to work with Niamh and the B&A on the subject, on the series, because I found it a nice way to kind of make just a little series within a series, and I found that very satisfying. And yeah. So, and the whole idea of landscape, I think it's interesting when you look at the history of it as well, that it wasn't until what, the 16th, 17th century that it was taken as a subject in its own right. Before that, it had been um, always a background to a religious story, a biblical theme, or Greek mythology, or grand portraiture, and landscape in itself wasn't really until, apart from, I think, in the Eastern cultures in China and places, it was a long time earlier actually than in Europe. But in Europe, it was quite late before landscape was seen as worthy of a subject on its own right. And I think it was the likes of Claude Lorraine, was it, who he gradually, the figures became smaller and smaller. He had these tiny little, in any biblical story, and the landscape became quite dominant. And it really, I think artists throughout Europe went on from there to realize that its potential for what would you say, for like they used it metaphorically, and gave it a greater impact and greater meaning, and by focusing on the sublime, and those metaphorical meanings as well. So it is I find that very interesting as well. And then it led on, of course, to the what would you call it, the heyday of landscape painting, with the likes of Turner, and going beyond the Impressionist movement, I suppose, and then landscape's place in postmodern art, modernist painting. Sorry, it was so it's an interesting thread to follow as well. This is a monoprint that I just brought it up as an example of one of the methods that I like working in. I enjoy monoprint a lot, as both to finish a work and also as a way of experimenting before I maybe make an etching, because it's the closest form of print, I think, that I found to painting. It's maybe a little bit more intuitive than etching. Although I must say, I do love in etching, I love you may, like, even though you may think you have the plates planned out and everything, as you work on them, they take on their own little voice often as well, I think, and I really do enjoy that. And you kind of have to work with them as much as you have to work with the painting. So maybe it's not fair to say that they're more technical or anything, but I suppose every method has its own tricks. But yeah, so I do enjoy monoprinting, though, as a form of, it's quicker as well, and it's kind of it's just it's another way of experimenting, I think, with print. So yeah, where are we? Okay, so I'm just going to, I think, next show some influences. Like I take, like every artist, I think, and everyone, my influences would not be just visual art. It's everything. It's reading. It's encounters you have, people you meet. It's music, film, everything. But just a quick look at some of the actual painters that influenced me a lot. I think I'd have to say number one was Turner. I remember the first time I went to see I went to the Tate. I think I was maybe 17, 18, in London for the first time, and I went to see Turner because I had seen a lot of his work in encyclopedias, and I think that was very early internet days. But what struck me when I first saw them, I think, was just the difference between seeing them in reality and seeing them in print. I remember I really was gobsmacked. And it on several, like, it made me think that it wasn't just the image that was the power of the work. It was kind of as if the piece was more than the sum of its parts. There was the image, but there was also the scale, the texture, the sort of vibrancy and energy that came off it. And I do remember thinking that after hundreds of years, that this painting, this piece still had that sort of highly charged energy coming from it. And I thought that was fascinating. And the effect that that had on releasing your imagination, I thought was very powerful. So that was a big kind of part in my decision, I think, to on how to progress as an artist. This was another piece that, again, I think here it doesn't, even seeing it on screen, it doesn't do it any justice. They were just, the impact they had at the time to me was immense. Oh, sorry, I don't know what's happening here. So this then was another, I think if I was to pick one movement that I have always, one particular movement, I mean, there's such a vast range of artists and painters and that I love, but as a group, I think the abstract expressionists were probably one of my favorites. And again, it's very hard to see the impact that they have on screen. I think Rothko, like it was, to me, again, that maybe that emotional power of color that that struck me the most, and I think that was something that came across. You could see the layering and the sort of scraping back he had done, and that there was, it's not just, for instance, it's not just black or red, there's always layers underneath it, and there was something very tactile or highly, I thought, effective about it. And I was lucky enough to see that exhibition recently in London of the abstract expressionists, and that was amazing to see all of those together for the first time in a long time, I think. So yeah, that was that one. And another, yeah, Agnes Martin. I think she considers herself an abstract expressionist as well, even though she's often called a minimalist. But either way, there's just such a lovely sense of peace from her work, and a sort of a stillness, and it's very drawing when you're given time, when you give it time, and when you're there again with it, I think. And the beautiful sort of sensitive use of color that she had, like incredibly subtle. So that was another work that I loved. Or there were, I mean, I've always loved the likes of William Blake and Hieronymus Bosch and El Greco and any number of influences, but I think those would have been big influences, especially early on, and they would have maybe driven the direction that I took. Even though I'm not, I'm not a, I don't see myself as a conceptual artist, I think, and well, to be honest, I don't really analyze my own work a whole lot, but yes, they would have been big influences. Moment, I think, what have I? Oh, this is just a studio shot at the moment of some works that I have in progress. I'm working towards an exhibition next year. Hope all going well. It was postponed from this year, so these will be there. I have some quite big paintings on the go, but they're at very early stages yet. And yeah, these are just some unfinished pieces. This would be this is an oil on canvas as well. More, again, most of this body of work will be the same, I think, for this exhibition. These are just very early sketch works and things that I've been working on, ideas and things. And this then is before the studio shut, this I was working on this diptych, which I'm hoping will be 3 panels if I can get it finished when we open up again. And it's, again, it's part of this particular piece is all etching, I think. I may add some carborundum and things to it depending on how it works. Yeah, and that brings me up to, I think, to date at the moment. So there, yes, I'm hoping, again, as I say, for the work that I'm doing for the exhibition, to kind of keep in the same kind of resolve more works in that series. So so I hope that sheds some light on my work at the moment. Yeah.
Wonderful, Ailbhe. Thanks so much. That was really, really magical and fascinating. I'm sure some people have a few questions. Um, I'll start with my one. um, you made a lot of this series having left Limerick for Dublin, which I kind of think is quite interesting. It's like that thing of, belonging, and I think it becomes highlighted when you move away from somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, I, I guess this year, not being able to travel so easily to and from Limerick, has that been very difficult, and has it affected the kind of work that you've been making?
It has been difficult, yeah. It's for everyone, I think. It definitely changes, yeah, when you leave a place. I mean, you look at it through a different lens, I think, and that's probably always evolving, I suppose, throughout our lives, how we look at where we came from and what it means to us, and that probably presumably continues to change. But it was, I would say, magnified not being able to go back, and I'm not sure how that will present itself in work. Like I often don't, will say might maybe working on something, but I don't produce the actual work for a number of years later. So possibly that possibly it will have an effect. I think it will have an effect on a lot of artists and how they on their work, and how they see what they're doing, and the world we're in at the moment and things. So I think it's definitely an interesting time. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
not easy for anyone.
No. Well, Friday mornings are easy.
Oh yeah.
Um, and anyone have any questions, guys?
Hi, Ailbhe.
Okay.
Hi, how are you, Kate?
Hi. That was lovely. A lovely way to start the day with looking
you.
at work. The stillness is beautiful. But I found it really interesting hearing, and even thinking about your work. Like, I know you live in Dublin, and looking at your work, it's lovely to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
But I wondered, and that sense of place and roots and memory, it's in your work. And I just wondered, do you ever actually work at home in the landscape?
Yeah. Do you mean like sketch works and I will say I've only moved to Dublin what, 6-7 years ago. Before that I was living in the country all of the time, living at home most of the time.
Okay.
And yeah, so it would have been a huge I've always worked up until the last number of years in the countryside, in terms of my studio was there and my work was based there, and I worked in Limerick printmakers there as well, but living outside in the countryside, and that was, and sketch work I would have done, and photography, a lot of it just out there, out in the landscape would have been, yeah, certainly, yeah, it would have been a big important part of it,
right,
to be there, I think, and to get that sense of that. Even then, it was changing all the time and evolving, and just maybe it's just that I think as artists we have or maybe not just art, but a sensitivity to kind of small voices and small things, or seemingly very quiet voices, but they're a big part of us as well. I think a big part of us as humans, our connections to like that, to our surrounds and to our past and to each other and all of this. So yeah.
Great, beautiful.
Thank you.
Can I say, Ailbhe, that's absolutely beautiful. And one of the things that I thought looking at is that, as well as memory, it felt a little dreamlike. And I was wondering, do you ever dream about home?
Oh yeah. No, I actually meant to bring that point. I think the subconscious is a big part of it.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, and it's a big part of all of us, I think. But maybe it's sometimes hard to connect to it, isn't it, or to be aware of it by its very nature, I suppose, being subconscious.
Yeah. Well, I thought that actually that's the nice thing about your work, is that it comes out. So you find something. And I find this, that sometimes I look at my work and then I can see what I was thinking. But I think with your work, I can see what you were feeling.
Okay.
Maybe
lovely.
you see that yourself as much as the detail, if you know what you were feeling that day, whether it was with
exactly.
cold or sadness or happiness.
Exactly. Yeah, very
Yeah,
much so. Yeah, it's about. I think that's what I'm trying to access is the emotion and the feelings involved in those attachments or experiences or times. Do you know?
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
It's yeah.
yeah. 'Cause they're
It's
quite
good.
intense in spite of being delicate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's good. Good. It's good. It's great to hear that it's something that you recognized or that you know that. Yeah.
absolutely.
That yeah.
Lovely.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Um, I guess, Alva, I see you as a very fearless printmaker. You're one of the most fearless printmakers I know. Like you're
Really?
never afraid to make really big things, and you know, there's like everything is thrown at them technique wise. You know, they're painting monoprint. You know, dry points. Uh,
Reckless.
nothing seems impossible. No, I wouldn't call it reckless. I wonder, does it come from starting as a painter? You know, like
I
especially the scale thing. I think a lot of printmakers start small and then gradually
get bigger.
inch by inch get
Yeah.
bigger. Whereas, you know, like that beautiful diptych that you showed us there at the end that may soon become a triptych. You know,
Yeah.
it's so big and it's just like it's beautiful. Like, do you think it's from your
Yeah.
painting background? That's where it.
I really do actually. When I remember first print making in Limerick, and yeah, I found I just kind of missed the scope that I had in a big canvas or a bigger canvas, and I kind of was impatient to maybe do that. But as you say, technically it's not easy. Like you're moving big plates, and it's kind of it's not. But yeah, I definitely think that the print was influenced by my painting. But I think I've said before that I find it very interesting as well that it worked the reverse way as well. That elements of printmaking influenced my when I went back to painting. So I found that very, very interesting. Things like thinking about the layers and the transparency and stuff, which was I found very interesting to see how they fed into each other. But I'd love to going forward. I think I would probably work bigger, even if it given the opportunity.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Proper
with both
fearless.
painting and with
Yeah.
and to explore maybe more things like to engage more consciously with representation and all of its complexities. I think maybe a little bit more. Although I think I like to work intuitively by nature, but it's something that anyone who works with representational material, I think, has to sort of figure out and deal with. And the other thing, maybe to explore more like I think I touched on the emotional power of color and abstraction in some form, or sort of how would you call it? Um, and I've always had an interest in the sublime as well, like the sort of the artistic effect that can get the most emotion out of the viewer or out of although mostly I think when I'm making them, I don't really think about how they're going to affect the viewer. Maybe it's more just what I'm putting into them in the moment, I think. Yeah, it's a
Hi, Alba.
hello, Ria, how are you?
Hello. I think I just wanted to say, like, I think editioning with Alba is incredibly interesting because I think a lot of printmakers get, I don't want to generalize, but sometimes they get a little bit bogged down in the exactitudes of editioning things identically. And I remember it was actually printing with Ruth O'Donnell as well. I remember Ruth just saying something wasn't entirely exactly the same, and she turned around and said, "But is it a beautiful print?" And I said, "Absolutely, it's a beautiful print." And with you, Alva, I think like some of them are variable, and you then they lead on to different versions of things or one-offs. But I think that's an amazing way to work, to be free and let the work kind of guide you. I don't know, does that ever just not even mistakes, but just variances in the prints, do they lead you to make new prints?
Yeah, actually, yes. I do find with both painting and print that one work tends to lead to the next to a certain extent, and each work is a development maybe of the one that went before it. And certainly it's fascinating. There's a lot of things in print that are really interesting, and that's one of them, is how variable each edition can be, or because everything is hand done, but it doesn't, to me anyway, it doesn't take away from the print if they're not all exactly the same, or if they're not all, but even though they're obviously, the edition is going to be an edition. But yeah, and I think that was one of the things with the mono printing as well. I found that because I could be quite loose and just go at it. Sometimes I'd come in early in the morning and just kind of have ink and plates all over the place, and just kind of run at them. And I found that when I did that, it gave me a lot of energy really to try and get that into an edition, an etching, or even maybe a painting sometimes if I was happy with the results. But yeah, I find the whole process and the the thing of being in a studio as well has its own sort of what would you call it, this it's sort of again an energy, I think. All of the processes in printmaking and the results of it, and all the different techniques, I find it really interesting, and it's great being in with such a level of expertise in graphic studio. You can only, I think, benefit hugely from it.
The Limerick landscape that you are largely mentally immersed in, and how do you adjust or portray the cityscape of Dublin?
I have, for that particular, so for this talk, I've kind of focused on that particular thread in my work, the returning to home, and it's again those attachments and those sort of emotions that brings about. I have maybe 4 or 5 different threads that I work on. That one has dominated certainly in the last number of years. But interestingly, I did a series of cityscapes of Limerick City. I think they had a different, maybe a different feel to them, and there were different reasons that I was working on it, but they're equally as significant when you're involved in making them, I think. And I have what have I got? 3. You might have seen it in the studio sketch there. I had a big sideways panel, which is kind of based on Baggot Street in Dublin. So I have a series that I'm, or maybe I would call it more a group of paintings that I'm working on that are to do with the last few years that I've been here. But they're a separate. I see them as maybe a little bit separate from that series. I think any place that you're engaged in and involved with and have kind of connection, you have to sort of know your subject, I think. Well, to me anyway, I think that's how nearly every artist would function. But I think yeah, so once you have any relationship or any involvement at all in a particular subject, or an emotional attachment or an emotional response to it, I think that's when you're going to make the work. That would be my
Have you an exhibition or anything coming up?
I do. It's, well, loosely, it was due to go ahead this year, but obviously that was so loosely scheduled for April, I think, next year.
Also, actually, there's a lovely video that Barry Lynch made for the Behaviour and Attitudes Commission. That's up on our YouTube channel. Ailbhe was it 3 years ago, Ailbhe?
2018.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's up on our YouTube if you want to have a look at it. It kind of goes into how those prints were made in more detail.
That's it.
Okay. We might leave it there then, guys. Ailbhe, that was absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much
I hope
for
it wasn't
sharing
too
your
rambling.
thoughts and your gorgeous images.